No, Lewis Hamilton is not going to be a flop at Ferrari, at least not in my opinion. But if you click this video, you're probably wondering what happens when you put one of the greatest drivers in history into one of the biggest career killers in F1 history. I don't have a crystal ball, so all I can do is tell you the reasons why Ferrari became a graveyard for great champions like Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso, and why I think it could be different with Hamilton. In my view, like everything that involves Ferrari, there's a lot of exaggeration and a kind of herd mentality caused by the constant jokes that literally every F1 fan, old or new, reads online every day. Disorganization, poor management, bad decisions, and even crimes have pushed the Italian team into its own little hole. But yeah, despite all that, Hamilton might just be another breath of fresh air in these years of struggle. In this video, I'm going to tell you why Ferrari is such a tough place to work, and also why I believe the British driver could overcome all that. But before we get into that, don't forget to subscribe the channel and give a thumbs up on this video. When I was younger, I practiced judo for a few years. And anyone who's ever worn a GI has probably heard the mantra of the sport that says you should use your opponent's strength against them. Based on this principle, the bigger your opponent, the more force you could turn against them during a fight. Of course, this wisdom doesn't necessarily apply to every part of life, and I really don't recommend going around fighting stronger people in the street. But the point is that this mantra seems to fit perfectly with Ferrari. Ferrari is a different team from all of the others. It's really the biggest one on the grid, and that brings a lot of benefits, like extra money, easier sponsorship deals, and merchandising. But it also brings problems, pressure. And that's the first factor that's made Ferrari a difficult place to be in recent years. The team is like a pressure cooker where everything gets amplified all the time. It's the only team on the grid that actually has a solid fan base, and more than that, it has an incredibly engaged local press. You don't see the German or Austrian press having a big impact on Mercedes or Red Bull, as the Italian press does on Ferrari. So any driver who comes to Maranello has to worry about managing the expectations of the fans, journalists, and also their bosses. But managing all that isn't easy because, as I said earlier, everything there is amplified. So if you do well in a race, you are the country's hero. And if you do badly, you are the worst and you don't deserve to wear red. The way some people talk, it almost seems like Ferrari hasn't had a competitive car since Schumacher retired in 2006, which is far from the truth. After that, Raikkonen won the championship in 2007, and both Vettel and Alonso had their chances at the title driving for Ferrari. Sure, neither of them were exactly the favorites when they had their chances, but the truth is, Ferrari made at least a competitive car for both of them. So no, the last few years haven't been a completely disaster. And then we can talk about what exactly kept the Italian team away from the trophies for so long. Some will say the problem was Alonso not being able to pass Petrov in Abu Dhabi 2010, others will say Vettel could have been more consistent on the second half of 2018, and many will blame Ferrari's strategies, which, yeah, have probably been the biggest source of jokes in F1 online for the last 10 years or more. And with a good reason, right? During that time, Ferrari even managed to do a pit stop with only 3 tires. There are plenty of excuses for all this incompetence, but I honestly think the Italian team just got stuck in the past. Because have you ever thought about the fact that Ferrari wasn't the only team to stay away from titles for so long? Williams and McLaren, the other 2 traditional F1 teams, also went through or are still going through long title droughts. Of course, with Ferrari, the pressure and the media attention are higher. But these 3 giants have one thing in common beside their history: a decline in performance in recent years after dominating the late 20th century and the early 2000s. Williams had a family management style that clearly hurt the development of the team in modern F1 era, and Ferrari and McLaren, in a way, also became easy targets for teams with more modern management styles like Mercedes and Red Bull, who dominated the sport during the worst periods of the more traditional teams. Exactly what I said about being a victim of your own success. The structure of past glamour and success also became a burden at times in history. Not to mention the impact of recent scandals, because we can't forget that McLaren had to survive the punishment for spying on Ferrari in 2007, and Ferrari had to survive to the punishment for cheating with their engine in 2019. All of this, ladies and gentlemen, is what made Ferrari get this bad reputation for ruining drivers' careers, especially after Alonso and Vettel no longer had competitive cars after their time at Maranello. But after talking about all the negatives, let me tell you why I think Lewis Hamilton won't fall victim to Ferrari's environment. First off, if you are comparing him to Vettel and Alonso, it's almost obvious to say that Lewis has shown over his career to be a better or at least more consistent driver than both. Not just in driving or talent, Lewis has much more inclusive and easy to get along with personality than the Spaniard, and he also seems to have more focus in keeping his head in the game than the German. So if you consider the previous driver's time at Ferrari a failure, which I personally disagree with, there are indeed technical reasons to believe that it could be different with him. But beyond that, Hamilton's biggest advantage coming to Ferrari might be the timing. The Italian team ended the 2024 season fighting till the last race for the Constructors' title and on the rise, while Red Bull, the biggest powerhouse of the current regulations, ended the year seriously concerned about the future. When Hamilton arrives in Italy, there's no team that's massively ahead of the others, very different from what Vettel faced when he joined Ferrari at the time when Hamilton was always the big favorite with his Mercedes, and also different from when Alonso had to compete with Vettel at a time when Red Bull was dominating. Another factor in Lewis's favor is that he's already extremely established in the sport. Not that the other champions didn't come in as accomplished, but the Brit has an impeccable career. Not winning a championship with Ferrari wouldn't diminish his legacy. Of course, all F1 fans and the specialized media are excited for the story of a 7-time world champion who will end Ferrari's drought and surpass Schumacher's world titles. But if he doesn't fulfill that prophecy, it wouldn't make Hamilton's career seem disappointing. And in that sense, he's probably the only driver who comes to Italy with the chance to not feel the weight of the German multi-champion's ghost. The two have very similar legacies in the sport, and although Lewis doesn't have as much clout in Ferrari as Schumacher did, at least he arrives as someone everyone has the same level of respect for. If Hamilton will succeed at Ferrari, only time will tell. But if I had to bet my hard-earned money, I'd say yes. That's what I had to say. But I want to know your opinion too. Leave a comment below if you think Hamilton will do well in red or not. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video because there's going to be a lot of content this year. And if you like me, you can also follow me on my personal social media @OcaioDiniz. See you out there.